Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Dan, for inviting me today to this 32nd annual CERAWeek. It is a truly great gathering of our industry from all around the world, and I'd like to thank everyone from IHS CERA. It's always a pleasure. I'd also like to congratulate Ernie Moniz on his nomination Monday for the new U.S. Energy Secretary. Dr. Moniz was to be here this week in conference. We know him well from his work at the MIT Energy Initiative. Whenever I come to a gathering such as this, I'm reminded of the contrast between the very comfortable places where we discuss and consume energy and the sometimes inhospitable places that we work. This is a fact that bears repeating. In order that people can live in comfort, the natural resource industries need to go to remote, challenging, and often hostile environments to access the necessary sources of energy for society. There's not a nation on earth where people aren't relying on us every day to deliver the energy that they need to do their jobs, to heat their homes, get their children to school, and countless other things. That's how people emerge from poverty. That's how energies and economies grow and the standard of living rises. So in brief, I have just a short time with you today, and I'd like to spend a few minutes on each of three connected themes. The global energy journey, what are the opportunities and challenges ahead? The key roles that will be played by two countries, the United States and Russia. And finally, BP's part of that journey and how we see ourselves fitting into that picture. If there is an overarching message in this, it is in business, we often talk about challenges and opportunities. What we face today in energy is a series of challenging opportunities, from the shales of America to the snows of Siberia. The opportunities are plentiful, but they are also complex and they are difficult. And from BP's perspective, and many other companies in our industry, all here today, the message is that we have to learn from recent events, and we plan to address these opportunities both safely, responsibly, and reliably. So to start with the global picture, there's quite a contrast between demand and supply. For many years, it's been clear demand is rising, and that trend has stayed consistent. But there has been a lot of change in where the supply is coming from. We estimate that global energy demand is likely to grow by more than a third between now and 2030. You just think about that number. It's a huge number. And according to the projections we make in our Energy Outlook 2030 publication, it will be the emerging economies, such as China and India, that are likely to account for almost all of that growth, over 90% of that growth. Non-fossil fuels energy, nuclear, hydro, biofuels, and other renewables will grow faster as a group than any other of the fossil fuels. But they start from a very, very low base and will only provide, on a combined basis, including hydro, about a fifth of all energy in 2030. Gas will be the fastest growing fossil fuel at around 2% annually. It's clean, it's cheap, and it's increasingly available. Oil will grow more slowly, at less than 1% per year, but that still means the world will need around 16 million barrels a day more in 2030 than it does today. So let's pause on what that means for a second. That increase alone of 16 million barrels a day is more than the combined daily 2011 production of Russia, of Canada, and the United Arab Emirates combined. Turning to supply, many in the industry used to worry about whether demand on this scale could even be met. We weren't among them, by the way, but there hasn't been much talk of peak oil lately. Thanks to new frontiers such as shale and the deep water, our industry is now producing an enormous amount of previously unreachable oil and gas. At current consumption rates, the data suggests the world has 54 years of proved oil reserves and 64 years worth of proved gas reserves in place. And more will be found. So we're working in a world with ever more diverse sources of supply, and diversity, of course, increases energy security by avoiding overdependence on any one source. However, this diversity comes at a price. Many of the new supplies are in places that are hard to get at: shale oil and gas, tight oil and gas, heavy oil, the deep water, and in due course, the Arctic Circle. And the physical and technology risks are not the only ones. Other factors range from fiscal regimes and other policy-related issues to geopolitical tensions and even the risk of terrorism. We at BP were brutally reminded of that fact just a few weeks ago when 4 of our employees and colleagues from other companies were murdered in the terrorist attack on the In Amenas gas plant in Algeria. Our thoughts are very much with the loved ones of those who died from BP, from Statoil, from JGC, and other organizations. Our sincere gratitude goes out to all who have offered support and sympathy, and many of you are in this room. Thank you. And in particular, I'd like to thank the Algerian Energy Minister, Youssef Yousfi, who was here at the conference yesterday, Mr. Zaghine, the CEO of Sonatrach. Their personal involvement during the crisis was outstanding and greatly valued. BP and Statoil staff and the contracting companies are incredibly resilient, full of committed people, and we will go on, but we will never forget the people involved, and we will go on with our mission of providing energy to the world. We've spent over a century producing energy in tough surroundings, and we will not be deterred. But the new opportunities bring new challenges, and we need constantly to develop our technology, our capability, and risk management. The process of reaching out for new resources is going on all over the world, but nowhere more so than in the country that produces the most oil and gas, Russia, and the country that is exhibiting the most spectacular growth in production here in America. When Colonel Drake drilled the first modern oil well in Pennsylvania in 1859, he gave birth to a new industry, and one that has led the U.S. to have a technology edge ever since. 40 years ago, this year, however, there was an oil shock, and a future of scarce energy or even resource wars was predicted. BP never subscribed to those fears, and in the last 5 years, the situation has been transformed. U.S. crude oil production has soared from an average of 5 million barrels a day in 2008 to over 7 million barrels per day at the beginning of this year, according to the U.S. Energy Department. Deepwater Gulf of Mexico exploration and production scarcely existed 20 years ago. In 2011, it provided 18% of U.S. daily crude production. Alaskan oil was widely expected to run out in the late 1990s, yet it is still producing. North Dakota, which is something that was not on anyone's radar screen really a few years ago, has seen its production soar from just over 100,000 barrels per day in 2006 to over 750,000 barrels a day last December. Not only has North Dakota now surpassed Alaska as America's second largest oil producer, it also pumps more oil today than the OPEC nation of Ecuador. Why is this happening? Well, resources below the ground are a prerequisite, of course, but favorable conditions above the ground are also essential. Almost uniquely among the nations of the world, the U.S. allows private citizens to own the mineral rights beneath their property, from the Earth's core to the sky. In most states, this gives private individuals a personal stake in energy development. It incentivizes entrepreneurs to compete with each other in order to develop the technologies to access the wealth that lies underground. So it isn't surprising that the world-changing technologies of the last 2 decades were all either developed or advanced in the U.S., and that's horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing, which was pioneered, incidentally, by Amoco in the 1940s, to deep water equipment, and of course the 3D and 4D seismic we and others have used to great effect in the Gulf of Mexico and in countries such as Angola and Azerbaijan. Here's another fact that certainly needs repeating. This industry is not only transforming the energy of America, but also the economy of America. Energy has rightly been called the #1 job creator in the U.S. economy, with oil and gas employment rising a remarkable 27% since 2008. Texas alone has added 180,000, mostly high-paying energy jobs in the last decade. and that's according to a report last week by the Wall Street Journal. Oklahoma added another 40,000, and the Intermountain West a further 30,000 jobs. And jobs are being created well beyond traditional energy regions, including what some used to call the Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. It is a great renaissance. BP has just returned to exploration in Ohio, for example. Who would have thought 10 years ago? Increased reserves and lower natural gas prices are also attracting new U.S. investment in manufacturing. Oil and gas taxes are pouring into the federal treasury and into many state governments. Import dependence is falling. In fact, with the abundance of domestic natural gas, a number of LNG export projects are now in the queue. They're awaiting federal government approval. Just last month, BP signed a 20-year LNG export agreement with Freeport LNG here in Texas. This sector is turning around America's balance of trade, helping it compete internationally, creating jobs, breathing new life into its economy. Colleagues, America should be very proud of its energy industry. This is not the only land of opportunity, though. Many other growing regions are represented here today, including many from Russia, right here in the front. There is a large delegation here at CERA from Rosneft, led by Igor Sechin today, and he'll be addressing you later today. Russia is the biggest country in the world. It also has the largest combined oil and gas reserves, as well as the highest combined production of oil and gas. In our view, its potential has yet to be fully realized by a long ways. There is enormous scope for increasing Russia's production through the enhanced recovery in brownfield developments in western Siberia and the Volga-Urals regions, and also through exploration and production in the greenfield developments in eastern Siberia and the Yamal Peninsula. Russia also has the potential to develop its own shale oil, shale and tight gas. What Russia and the U.S. have in common is that each will require energy investment on an epic scale, undertaken by energy partners who are not daunted by the obstacles and have the resources and the experience, capability, and appetite for that task. I'd certainly put BP in that category. BP has been an integral part of the American energy story for nearly half a century, with a family tree that contains many illustrious American ancestors. One was the Standard Oil of Indiana, which began in 1889 with a single refining facility in Whiting, Indiana, near Chicago. As I mentioned, we have contributed technology, from early fracturing techniques to 4D seismic processing via massive supercomputers. In fact, we're in the midst right now of building the world's largest commercial supercomputer research facility right here in Houston. Overall, we have invested $55 billion in the U.S. over the last 5 years, more than any other energy company, and more than we have invested in any other country. We have 21,000 U.S.-based employees and support 10 times that many as a result of our U.S. business activities. That's nearly 250,000 jobs across the U.S., a supply chain we hope to sustain. We also have about 40% of our shareholders here in the United States. Last year, we produced 675,000 barrels of oil equivalent each day in the U.S. That's more than 20% of our global production. And we also support low-carbon energy. Over the past 8 years, BP has invested around $8 billion on alternative energy, real hard industrial investments. Over half has been in our wind farms, which have more than 1,000 turbines spinning alone in the U.S., as well as advanced biofuels facilities here in the U.S. and in Brazil and in the U.K. Our commitment to American energy development has never wavered, even after the Deepwater Horizon spill. Among the many responsible parties, we alone stepped up from the outset, acknowledging our role, waiving the liability cap, and committing ourselves to help restore the environment and the economy of the Gulf Coast region. We did not wait for a court to determine fault in order to do what we believed was the right thing. To date, BP has spent over $24 billion in response, cleanup, restoration costs, and in payments on claims made by individuals, businesses, and governments. We have spent or provisioned now more than $40 billion. We've learned from the accident and shared the lessons. We have a powerful safety and operational risk team working alongside our businesses. We have restructured our business to continue driving systematic and reliable operations worldwide. We have returned to activity in the Gulf, where we're the largest deepwater leaseholder, with 7 big deepwater rigs operating today. And as you know, almost 3 years later, we and our contractors are currently on trial in New Orleans. We are vigorously defending the company, but we are determined to make our case in the courtroom and not in the press. We believe the law and the facts are on our side, and we have faith in the legal system. And in terms of investment in the U.S., the wheel is turning full circle back to Indiana. At Whiting, we are about to complete the modernization of our refinery to process Canadian crude. It is the single largest economic investment ever in Indiana's history. And it's just not Whiting. Tomorrow we're dedicating a new $500 million reformer that we started up earlier this year at Toledo in Ohio. It's a refinery we operate with Husky. The completion of this 2-year project will not only help the refinery meet future environmental regulations, but also build on our track record of cutting emissions at the plant nearly in half since 2000. We've been a part of America's energy history, and we plan to be part of America's energy future. But we are a global company and select investments carefully from a world of opportunities. We have gas plays in Asia and the Middle East, deep water possibilities in the Atlantic, the Indian Oceans, from Africa to South America, the South China Sea, and the Great Australian Bight. And of course, one of our largest investments is in Russia. Our TNK-BP investment has been hugely successful, although at times adventurous. Between 2003 and 2011, TNK-BP's proved reserve base grew almost 50%, while production increased by more than 40%. And the company paid well more than $1 billion in duties and taxes and levies in Russia during its time. I think it is a testament to the powerful partnership of Russian oil and gas professionals and BP colleagues working together. It became clear, however, that the joint venture was ultimately unsustainable, and we've managed to turn that challenge into an opportunity. Rosneft is acquiring TNK-BP, and we will take nearly a 20% stake in Rosneft. I am very excited because I think this is an example of creating the right conditions above the ground to develop the resources below the ground. Having integrated TNK-BP, Rosneft will be Russia's biggest oil company and the largest oil producer globally. But more important, it has a real commitment to many of the factors needed to develop Russia's potential. That's skills, technology, risk management, and the drive for efficiency. The U.S. and Russia are both huge producers and places where things are moving fast. After decades of false starts, the U.S. seems to have hit upon a successful energy policy mix. And Russia is well on its way. And I trust both countries will maintain an open, welcoming environment for energy development. So I'm going to close on a note of optimism. History in our business has favored the optimist. The resource wars that were predicted when I joined the industry never came to pass. In fact, the world's energy companies have produced more oil in the past 40 years than was thought to exist on the entire globe in 1979 when I started in the industry. And in terms of our company, if I may end on this note, we faced challenges in recent years in America, in Russia, and elsewhere. But as I said at the beginning, this is not a business for the faint-hearted or the easily discouraged, and we're neither. 2 years ago, when I stood here, actually at this very spot, I was determined that we would emerge from the Deepwater Horizon accident as a safer, stronger, more sustainable company. I said we would meet our commitments and that we would apply what we had learned throughout our organization. We've made good on those promises. We're honoring our commitments. We have set new standards. We continue working very systematically on safety, and our record is improving. We've strengthened our portfolio and invested for growth here in the U.S., in Russia, and around the world. We look forward to working with you all here in this room for many decades to come as we tackle another challenging opportunity that we all face with our great industry. Thank you very much.